Welcome, everyone, to this Georgetown University webinar conference, Interreligious Responses to Laudato Si, a 5th anniversary celebration and reaffirmation of Pope Francis' encyclical on care of our common home. This conference comes 5 months into a commemorative year of celebrations of Laudato Si. Hello. I'm John Borelli from Georgetown University. This is the opening session of a 3-session webinar conference. In this session, our keynote speaker and respondents will be addressing how Laudato Si moves interreligious dialogue forward. I will now introduce to you President DeGioia of Georgetown University. For close to 4 decades, John J. DeGioia has helped to define and strengthen Georgetown University as a premier institution for education and research. A Georgetown alumnus, Dr. DeGioia served as a senior administrator and as a faculty member in the Department of Philosophy before becoming Georgetown's 48th president in 2001. Dr. DeGioia has placed special emphases on sustaining and strengthening Georgetown's Catholic and Jesuit identity and the university's responsibility to serve as a voice and an instrument of peace and justice. He has been a strong advocate for ecumenical and interreligious dialogue, as well as various forms of public dialogue. He has sponsored conferences and lecture series, some in partnership with the Holy See, the Vatican, to foster reflection and the exchange of ideas on a variety of themes affecting humanity, Catholic identity, and the Earth community in the 3rd millennium. Dr. DeGioia.
Good morning. It is my privilege to welcome all of you to our celebration of the 5th anniversary of Laudato Si. And I wish to begin by thanking each of you for joining us and our presenters and organizers who have made this convening possible. I'd like to especially thank His Eminence, Cardinal Miguel Ayuso, for offering his reflections this morning, and the Pontifical Council for Interreligious Dialogue for the support of this convening. It was just about 18 months ago that we were together in Rome envisioning a conference just like this one, and we're so grateful to see how it has developed. Cardinal Ayuso, thank you. The Yale Forum on Religion and Ecology and its co-founders, Mary Evelyn Tucker and John Grimm, have been terrific partners. We'll hear from each of them in a moment, and it's wonderful to work together again following our convening last year on the life and work of Thomas Berry. I'd like to thank them and all of our speakers for their participation in our gathering. Here at Georgetown, there are so many who have supported the development of this convening: our Berkeley Center for Religion, Peace, and World Affairs and its director, Sean Casey, our Office of the Vice President for Global Engagement under the leadership of Tom Banchoff, and my colleagues, John Borelli and Sam Wagner, who have led so many extraordinary conferences together. Thank you. In this gathering, we're invited to reflect on the challenge set forth by the Holy Father 5 years ago. In Laudato Si, Pope Francis calls for the moral and practical solutions that are required to respond to the urgent environmental challenges that threaten our common home. This challenge was given new dimensions in his recent encyclical, Fratelli Tutti, focused on the human family. Both remind us of our shared responsibility for our earth and for one another. Both demonstrate the possibilities that emerge in interfaith dialogue and collaboration. In Fratelli Tutti, Pope Francis describes what interfaith engagement has meant for him, enabling him to draft these 2 encyclicals, actions that he describes as, quote, no mere diplomatic gesture, but a reflection born of dialogue and common commitment. Close quote. In our gathering today, during what the Pope has called the Laudato Si anniversary year, we are invited to reflect on these commitments. What is asked of us to answer the imperative to care for our common home? How can our response call on and unite those across faith traditions who share our commitment to the environment? To open our gathering and to guide our reflection on these questions, we are honored to have with us His Eminence, Cardinal Miguel Ayuso. Since May of 2019, Cardinal Ayuso has served as president of the Pontifical Council for Interreligious Dialogue. He previously served as secretary of PCID for 7 years. A scholar of Islamic studies and interreligious dialogue, he studied, taught, and was director of the Pontifical Institute for Arabic and Islamic Studies, also known as PISI. He also served as a parish priest in Egypt and Sudan. 1 year ago, Pope Francis elevated him as a cardinal. Your Eminence, we're deeply grateful for your leadership and your presence at our gathering. Thank you for being with us.
Thank you, Dr. DeGioia. His Eminence, Cardinal Miguel Ayuso.
Thank you. Dear friends, it gives me great joy to join you all in this virtual conference organized by the Georgetown University to mark the 5th anniversary of Laudato Si, the much celebrated encyclical letter of Pope Francis. My sincere appreciation to the organizers for this initiative, which is among the many events and projects across the globe to celebrate the impact to the world over the last 5 years and to encourage multiplying of efforts for converting them into a people's movement for the protection and care of the earth, our common home. The COVID-19 pandemic, I am sure all of you would agree, has only hastened the urgency of attending to this dire need. The year from to 24th of May 2021, as you would know, has been declared a special Laudato Si anniversary year by the Vatican. I am happy that this event is taking place during this special anniversary year, and particularly so within a few days after the release of Fratelli Tutti, the latest encyclical letter of Pope Francis, and the international meeting of prayer for peace. Pope Francis, in the spirit of Assisi, expressed the ardent desire that there may no longer be others, but rather a great we, rich in diversity. The source of inspiration for both Laudato Si and Fratelli Tutti, as the Holy Father acknowledges, is one and the same person, and that is St. Francis of Assisi, who felt himself a brother to the sun, the sea, and the wind, yet he knew that he was even closer to those of his own flesh. It is only inevitable, therefore, that there is a connecting thread between the two encyclicals. Some commentators have pointed out that Laudato Si taught us that everything is connected, whereas Fratelli Tutti teaches us that everyone is connected. As brothers and sisters, and as such, we need to think of ourselves more and more as a single family, dwelling in a common home. There is thus an inseparable link between the two encyclicals. Both are complementary to each other. Our reflections on Laudato Si henceforth cannot but be in close reference to Fratelli Tutti. May all our efforts, individual and collective, during this year and in the years to come, therefore, universal consciousness, duly supported by concrete actions on the ground for the protection and well-being of our planet and of one another. All of us, irrespective of whichever religion we profess, have a moral and religious responsibility to shape an ethic of care for the earth, which is our shared home. A common commitment to creation by people of different religious traditions can offer real hope for the future of life on earth. It is needless to say that religions play a paramount role in nurturing respect for creation and in safeguarding the legitimate diversity and the value systems as resources for harmony with one another and harmony with nature. They possess much wisdom to help us bring about the needed changes in our life, surroundings, and in the society to overcome the deterioration of the conditions of our planet. The leaders of religious communities, likewise, play a vital role in shaping attitudes, opinions, and behaviors among their followers for the judicious management and equitable use of the natural resources and for the sustainable development of all. In addition, they have a moral duty as well, as the document on human fraternity for world peace and living together says, to spread the values of peace, justice, goodness, beauty, human fraternity, and coexistence. And no doubt, religious communities do and can make a significant contribution to addressing the issues of climate change, biodiversity, and ecosystem loss, pollution, deforestation, desertification, and unsustainable land and water use, and other urgent issues. Many of you would agree, I am sure, that the ecological crisis and the safeguard of the environment, peace, and partnership are central to all faiths, and that they are all inseparably linked to one another. In Laudato Si, Pope Francis underlines the urgency and importance of dialogue with all religions for the care of our common home, arguing that the ecological crisis is basically a spiritual problem, and therefore interreligious dialogue is fundamental to solving it. Environmental matters are becoming and should increasingly become an interreligious concern so as to bring about an ecologically responsible social order based on shared values. For, as the document on human fraternity notes, we human beings are united as brothers and sisters on a wonderful pilgrimage woven together with creatures, and which also unites us in fond affection with brother sun, sister moon, brother river, and mother earth. The interconnection and interdependence among us and with nature invite each of us to go beyond differences of class, creed, race, or culture, and to collaborate as one human family in protecting the integrity of our home, now and for future generations. We believers need to take the given the complexity of the ecological crisis and its multiple causes, we need to realize that the solutions will not emerge from just one way of interpreting and transforming reality. Respect must also be shown for the various cultural and poetry, their interior life and spirituality, if we are truly concerned to develop an ecology capable of remedying the damage we have done. No branch of the sciences and no form of wisdom can be left out, and that it. Many religious people today seem to think that the environmental crisis at the base is human caused and thus choose to leave it at that unconcerned. It is time for them to rethink about how they consider the crisis. Because according to Pope Francis, the ecological crisis is ultimately linked to a crisis of values, a spiritual void that pervades the society of our times. There is the need, therefore, to offer alternative models based on values and spiritual paths to arrest the crisis. While this should be the case, there must also be an ongoing dialogue among the different fields of knowledge, including science, in the service on a more integral and integrating vision, and for the common good. And in this connection, it is pertinent for me to remember what Pope Benedict XVI said regarding the misconception about the relation between religion and science. He said, and I quote, "There is no opposition between faith and science. Instead, there is friendship between science and faith, and that scientists, through their vocation to the study of nature, can take an authentic and fascinating path of holiness." One of the most essential and effective models has been ecumenical and interreligious dialogue. I would like to focus on the latter of the two. The good news is that concern for environment has now become a major interreligious preoccupation. Besides, the adherents of various religions also have begun to formulate their own religious perspectives on ecological issues. For example, we have a Buddhist declaration on climate change. We have a second Buddhist climate change statement to world leaders in 2015, an Islamic declaration on climate change in 2015 as well, and also a Hindu declaration. So, for its part, the Pontifical Council for Interreligious Dialogue has highlighted the importance and contribution of interreligious dialogue in combating the ecological crisis. It has done so through its messages on the occasion of the most important feasts of other major religions and organizing of conferences. Speaking of Laudato Si, it must be underscored that it has made a great impact on society from an interreligious point of view. It has created greater awareness among people of different religious traditions about climate change and expanded, deepened, and accelerated the ongoing dialogue on climate change and climate justice. It has brought about positive changes in the lives of people in respect for and protection of nature. It has also caused increased understanding of how everything in the world, human beings and nature, is interconnected. Through its call for integral development and integral ecology, it has brought also inclusivism into greater focus. And it has generated hundreds, if not thousands, of interreligious initiatives and projects all over the world to enhance awareness among the people about the urgent need of doing something together and in concrete to save the Mother Earth. It has also made people to revert back to the teachings of their respective religious traditions, to understand better how the relationship between God, human beings, and nature are intertwined. The interreligious conversations on the encyclical and the activities prompted by the document also gave the opportunity of knowing the perspectives of other religions on the subject. Inspired by the messages of the encyclical, organizations belonging to other religious traditions brought out their own versions of declarations on care for nature. So, interreligious dialogue, as has been demonstrated by Laudato Si, can play a monumental role in bringing about the much needed solidarity towards finding lasting solutions to environmental development. There remains, however, a lot more to be done to ensure an ecologically responsible social order based on shared values. The COVID-19 pandemic beckons us to do the same without any further delay, accelerating and augmenting interreligious solidarity and cooperation. Laudato Si was, in a way, a prophetic document that predicted of a looming crisis, social, climatic, etc., on the horizon of the earth urgently. None, perhaps, expected that the prophecy will come to pass anytime soon, and the result is that we were caught off guard when the catastrophe struck. We have been witnesses, directly or indirectly, to the devastating impact of the pandemic on humanity, while thousands and thousands of lives have been lost and livelihoods of millions destroyed. The pandemic brought to fore the scandalous inequalities on the basis of creed and race existing in the society. The worst affected due to the pandemic and the subsequent lockdowns have naturally been the poor, the migrants, and the most vulnerable of the society. The overwhelming sense of helplessness and vulnerability we felt and continue to feel still has made us realize that we all are equal before the coronavirus. It doesn't see religion, race, class. The pandemic has also made us recognize, as the Holy Father says, that when we mistreat nature, we also mistreat human beings. The health crisis and the lockdowns have positive changes in our thinking and living. They have presumably made us become less individualistic, less consumerist, and less self-centered. Most importantly, the pandemic has brought about human and interreligious solidarity as never seen before in the recent known human history. This is in many ways a promising sign of hope amidst the doom and gloom caused by the virus. Pope Francis, through his various gestures and pronouncements, has demonstrated his spiritual closeness to all those who are suffering due to COVID-19, as well as to all the frontline warriors of the pandemic. They are great motivators for all, most especially for the suffering humanity. The extraordinary moment of prayer of March 27 that we all remember, and his endorsement by the Pope of the Global Day of Fasting, Prayers, and Good Deeds for the Good of All Humanity of 14th of May 2020, an initiative of the Higher Committee of Human Fraternity, are among the most notable moments when he united himself with the suffering and appealed to everyone to pray for and to reach out to the suffering. Following in his example, we believers, and in particular religious leaders, are called upon to spread what he delights in calling the contagion of hope among the masses. He calls us rather to become sowers of hope for a better tomorrow. So, dear friends, Laudato Si decried our broken relationships with God, with neighbors, and with the earth. It called for repairing and restoring harmony with one another and with nature. The present crisis must be understood as an opportunity and a grace to restore those relationships and to adapt a new way of living based on fraternal love, equality, justice, harmony, and peace. The realization of our shared humanity, shared destiny, and shared responsibility for one another and for the world must spur us on to further build on the robust interreligious solidarity existent at the moment for the welfare of human family, not just during the pandemic period, but beyond. May this lead us in this special year of the anniversary to generously cooperate with one another as instruments of God for the care of creation, each according to his or her own culture, experience, involvement, and talents. As a conclusion, I would like to say that our fragility as human beings and our interdependence on one another, as has been eloquently exposed by the pandemic, is a more than enough reason for us to be united and committed not just to ward off the coronavirus, but also to work together for the betterment of humanity. May we promote unity, solidarity, and brotherhood among all, so that we courageously face the current challenges as well as those of the immediate future. It is my hope that we will emerge from the present crisis better and stronger and help our societies to become more humane, where people care for one another and care for creation. Thank you for listening.
Thank you, Your Eminence, Cardinal Ayuso. We so appreciate this keynote address, setting the tone for our webinar for these next few days, next two sessions. Thank you for reminding us of one of the major themes of Laudato Si, that the ecological crisis is a spiritual problem. You quoted especially that wonderful passage in paragraph 63 of Laudato Si. Given the complexity of the ecological crisis and its multiple causes, we need to realize that the solutions will not emerge from just one way of interpreting and transforming reality. Respect also must be shown for the various cultural riches of different peoples, their art and poetry, their interior life and spirituality. If we are truly concerned to develop an ecology capable of remedying the damage we have done, no branch of the sciences and no form of wisdom can be left out, and that includes religion and the language particular to it. In particular, you connected, as Pope Francis did, climate change and climate justice. And then you connected to the pandemic very wonderfully, showing, that this catastrophe, as you called it, has brought us to this particular point. As Dr. DeGioia said, just one second here, as Dr. DeGioia reminded us, in his words of welcome, Professors Mary Evelyn Tucker and John Grimm are the founders of the Forum on Religion and Ecology at Yale University, where they have appointments in the School of Environment, the Divinity School, and the Department of Religious Studies, and teach in the joint MA program in Religion and Ecology. Prior to that, they directed a 10-conference series and book project at Harvard University on world religions and ecology over several years. Professor Tucker's special area is Asian religions. She received her doctorate from Columbia University in Japanese Confucianism. She has several monographs in that field. Professor Grimm's special area of study is Native American and Indigenous religions, having received his PhD from Fordham University, focusing on the shaman, patterns of religious healing among the Ojibwe. He has undertaken field work among other peoples and is author of several works in that field too. All three of us together studied in graduate school with the passionist priest, scholar, cultural historian, and visionary Thomas Berry, whom Georgetown remembered, as Dr. DeGioia reminded us, last year at this time with a conference in the 105th anniversary of his birth and the 10th of his death. Father Berry, in 1966, in the wake of the Second Vatican Council, established the first History of Religions program in a theology department in a Catholic university in the United States, and that was at Fordham University. In his final years of teaching and during his very productive retirement years, Father Berry focused zealously and optimistically on religious responses to the ecological crisis. Professors Grimm and Tucker worked closely with him, editing several of his books, and are managing trustees of the Thomas Berry Foundation. They are also authors of Thomas Berry, a biography, Columbia University Press, 2019. Professors Tucker and Grimm succeeded Father Berry as president of the American Teilhard Association and guided that organization for 40 years. Much more could be said about these two fine scholars, professors, activists, and their writings whom we have today as respondents to the Cardinals' talk, especially their Emmy award-winning film project, Journey of the Universe. And let me just add that Mary Evelyn and John have spoken and written extensively in these last 5 years about Laudato Si', and especially worth noting is their article, Integrating Ecology and Justice, the papal encyclical, and that appeared in the Quarterly Review of Biology in September 2016. I also want to say that Mary Evelyn serves on the Ecology Task Force for the Vatican's Dicastery for Promoting Integral Human Development, and that is organizing a post-COVID all-out response to what the Earth community will be facing for years to come. Mary Evelyn Tucker and John Grimm.
Thank you so much. We are grateful to the Cardinal for his succinct and insightful speech and his years of work in interreligious dialogue. We're grateful too to President DeGioia for his warm, welcoming remarks, and to our friend John Borelli for organizing this conference with assistance from Sam Wagner. We're especially grateful to Pope Francis for his remarkable leadership and delighted that Father Josh will be joining us from the Vatican with the Dicastery for Promoting Integral Human Development. My husband, John Grimm, and I want to thank Georgetown University and the Berkeley Center for hosting this conference. It is wonderful for the Yale Forum on Religion and Ecology to collaborate with them in celebrating the 5th anniversary of Laudato Si' and the recent publication of the new remarkable encyclical Fratelli Tutti. Both are deeply inspired by the spirit of Francis of Assisi, who elevated kinship with humans and nature as central to his message of reform. May his spirit live on with these encyclicals in ever deepening care of the earth and ever broadening compassion for all life. Let me raise a few points in response to the Cardinal's fine and stimulating speech. As the Cardinal notes, Laudato Si' is a document of immense importance to people inside and outside the Catholic Church, from other world religions, but also from the secular world of academia and business. Even as a younger person working within the social justice movements of the Church, I would say to my mother, if we have an encyclical on the environment from a Pope who is beloved, we will have a chance for the future of our planet. This is because Thomas Berry, our teacher, had a profound foreboding of the ecological unraveling, such as we are seeing now, from the time I first met him in 1975, 45 years ago. Others who have been following the environmental and climate crisis for many, many years have agreed on the importance of Laudato Si'. Our dean at the Yale School of the Environment at the time, Peter Crane, wanted us to organize a panel discussion at Yale on the encyclical even before it came out, because the semester could be over in May. And so we did for a standing room only audience in April 2015, representing many of the schools, law school, divinity school, the School of the Environment, and this all at a highly secular university. After the Paris conference in December 2015, we held a panel at our School of the Environment, and the first speaker, Dan Esty, a professor of policy and law on the environment, held up Laudato Si' and said, this is why we got a climate agreement in Paris. When we invited the environmental activist Bill McKibben to speak at Yale, he said to us that he sees this encyclical as the most important document of the 21st century. And think how many books he has written, read, and endorsed. And finally, Amitav Ghosh, a leading Indian intellectual, concluded his book, The Great Derangement, and his talk at Yale with immense and singular praise for Laudato Si'. Why then is this response so widespread from secular and religious people alike? Because Laudato Si' holds up an inspiring vision of integral ecology where people and planet are seen as one indivisible entity. Until recently, there's been a long-standing division between environmentalists who have focused on saving nature and theologians who have focused on saving humans. We have seen this divide over 40 years of teaching between schools and departments of the environment and schools of theology or departments of religion. The encyclical brings these together in a powerful way. We are now seeing more scientists open to a moral approach, such as Ed Wilson, Tom Lovejoy, Peter Raven, Mario Marino, and Ramanathan at San Diego, and those at the Woodwell Center for Climate Research. Some 25 years ago, Thomas Berry was also trying to overcome this division between science and religion. He encouraged the liberation theologian Leonardo Boff to see that there is no liberation possible for the human community without including the health and well-being of the Earth community. Berry said, you can't have healthy people on a sick planet. We see this clearly now during the pandemic. Boff heard Berry and responded by writing his critical book, The Cry of the Earth, The Cry of the Poor. This was published in the Orbis book series on ecology and justice in 1997, which we are trying there to bring together this vision of an integral ecology of people and planet. 2 decades later, this cry of the earth, cry of the poor has become a signature passage in Laudato Si and in every conference following. This perspective is now one of the grounds for a growing movement for environmental justice in academia, in religious communities, and in the broader world. I might note this aspiration for eco-justice is of immense concern for our students in Yale and young people around the world. One concrete thing we can do is extend to them an intergenerational and interreligious handshake based on a mutual commitment to eco-justice. For this will build on the awakening across generations and across religions in the US, especially to racial and environmental injustices towards Native Americans, African Americans, Latinos, and people of color. But responding to the cry of the earth and the cry of the poor and realizing a genuine environmental justice will require an ecological conversion, as the Pope has called for in a whole chapter in Laudato Si. This will mean a recognition across religions that we live in a sacred universe and are part of an extraordinary unfolding story that reveals astonishing beauty and complexity. This great mystery that holds us and guides us through the travails and joys is woven into the incarnational fabric of all life. Teilhard de Chardin understood this sacred evolutionary context well, and Thomas Berry and Brian Swimme brought this into an ecological context with the universe story. This long-term perspective of the preciousness of all life is the ecological conversion that is needed, not simply saving humans for the afterlife, but restoring life here on this planet for the well-being of all future generations. In this spirit of ecological conversion, the Cardinal notes, as does the Pope, that the ecological crisis is ultimately linked to a crisis of values, a spiritual void that pervades the society of our time. Materialism gone mad, market economy unrestrained, massive insidious social media, mindless infotainment blocks out the depths of suffering so many are enduring. We are blinded to the 90 million climate refugees around the world, including in our own country, due to the onslaught of climate-related drought, fires, and floods. Because we recognize that the ecological crisis is basically a spiritual problem, we can see more than ever, as the Cardinal notes, that interreligious dialogue is fundamental to solving it. He says, the safeguard of the environment in respect to people, planet, prosperity, peace, and partnership are central to all faiths. This is precisely what we have been trying to identify in the Yale Forum with hundreds of scholars and activists around the world. Since the 10 Harvard conferences and books that were published on world religions and ecology from 95 to 2004, a new field has emerged within academia, and a new vibrant force has blossomed in societies and communities around the world, this moral force for change. For 20 years now, ecological statements have been emerging along with books and articles and activism in world religions and ecology. And you can see this on the forum website, for.yale.edu. And I want to note that just like the civil rights movement exploded into a new form of embodiment with the force of religious leaders in the 1960s, so too with Laudato Si and with the world's religions, we have a moment to change the face of the earth with this moral force. And that is the power of what the Cardinal has brought to us today and what Laudato Si and Fratelli Tutti brings. We will explore this force in two panels in this conference where we will hear responses from speakers in Hinduism, Buddhism, Jainism, Judaism, and Islam. And special mention should be made of the inspiration of the ecumenical patriarch Bartholomew to the Pope and to all of us. He first spoke of ecological sin and crimes against creation more than 25 years ago. It is into this growing field and force of world religions and ecology that Laudato Si has landed on fertile ground. It has inspired other statements and commitments from many of the world's religions, as the Cardinal noted. The encyclical has become a catalyst to ignite religious leaders and laity, organizations and communities in a worldwide effort that brings us together in concern for our common home. An important example of this is the United Nations Environment Program, Faith for Earth, directed by Iyad Abu Mogli, who will also speak tomorrow and is a partner with us in the Yale Forum. Let me conclude with two lines from the Cardinal. Laudato Si taught us that everything is connected, whereas Fratelli Tutti teaches us that everyone is connected as brothers and sisters. And as such, we need to think of ourselves more and more as a single family dwelling in a common home. The realization of our shared humanity, shared destiny, and shared responsibility for one another and for the world must spur us on to further build on the robust interreligious solidarity existent at the moment for the welfare of the human family, not just during the pandemic period, but beyond. Thank you to all listening. Thank you to the Cardinal for your wonderful remarks. And thank you to Pope Francis and Saint Francis for the inspiration.
Thank you very much, Mary Evelyn, for your response. Let me first say to our viewers who have been very patient listening to the keynote address and to the response, you may email questions, and I think it's being shown on your screen too, to Berkeley Center, and that's BERKLEY Center, all one word, at georgetown.edu. So email questions, and we ask you to identify yourself when you email to Berkeley Center at georgetown.edu. Your Eminence, let me ask you first. Need to unmute. Good. Do you have any reflections now after listening to the response from Professor Tucker?
Well, I am very thankful to Dr. Tucker because I think you have said one thing very, very, very important, and it is that Laudato Si, it is the most important document on the 21st century. I have not the proofs, but I was told that Laudato Si is the document most published in the world in this past decade. So if there is a document that has been really reaching the four corners of the world, it is but Laudato Si. So this means how important the document has been, and it is a document that Pope Francis has combined now with the new encyclical Fratelli Tutti, because while we are called to take care of our common home, obviously, at the heart of our common home, there is the human person. And so a second step taken by Pope Francis has been this call through the document on human fraternity, signed in 4th of February 2019 in Abu Dhabi, on human fraternity for world peace and living together. Like saying, we cannot forget, that human beings have to live with more dignity in our days. And following the steps of Saint Francis of Assisi, of which he has taken the Pope the name, and that has marked the orientation of his pontificate. Here we see how Fratelli Tutti is putting in the heart of this creation in our planet the human person, and to stress how important is, while we are taking care of preserving our nature, the ecology, to promote this ecological justice, as mentioned by Professor John Borelli, and at the same time to see how today we are living in a series of crises of values, of which Fratelli Tutti also give good responses, so that we may live in harmony in our planet as brothers and sisters, by caring together of our common home.
Thank you.
Any comment? Any comment, Mary Evelyn, John?
Thank you so much. And I think that the fact that interreligious dialogue has been growing since Vatican II, over 60 years, we have a good basis on which to bring religions together for the future of our common home. So that's a very positive and hopeful event. And John Borelli has been working in that area too for a long, long time.
That's right. Actually, 55 years since Nostra Aetate, but who's counting, huh?
Right.
Mary Evelyn, you said that we have a moment that Laudato Si landed on fertile ground.
Mhm.
That was 5 years ago. Let me ask all of you, what specific signs of hope do you see in these, have you seen in these past 5 years since the encyclical came out?
Well, John's going to touch on some of that in his talk, I think, as well. And but I think the signs of hope are that fraternity arises in the midst of crisis, and we see this environmental destruction, and we see the vulnerability of people, and that is a sign of hope, that the chaos is bringing people together in very creative and remarkable ways. But the spiritual well springs, we have to deepen them. And that's where I think this huge message of Teilhard de Chardin and Thomas Berry will be very, very helpful to give people the long-term hope of this extraordinary unfolding process of which we are the co-creators. This is a blessed and sacred task. And I think that's also emerging as a hopeful sign.
And I see this hope also reaching young people, that the message of Laudato Si resonates with the directions in which young people are urging the older generations to move towards also. So this is a very hopeful moment in the midst of the pain of the pandemic.
Your Eminence.
I also say a word, because yes, we have to think of a new generation, and we are responsible of our planet. So we cannot get lost. We have to give hope. We have to become, as I said, sowers of hope. We have to be people ready to spread this contagion of hope in the world. And I think, Dr. Tucker, that indeed today, after Laudato Si in 5 years' time, I think that there is, and I'm convinced of it, a clear our planet, and that now we have reacted, and that we are walking in a process of recuperation and restoring and creating what nature and the planet was and is. Not for us, not for our knowledge, but thinking of a new generation, and giving this hope that things may and must change.
Yes, I think that's so true. And the United Nations, I believe, is going to start in January, a decade for restoration. And I think at our School of the Environment, restoration is such an important idea ecologically, but as we all know, spiritually as well.
And the practice.
And that's where, if this intergenerational handshake with the next generation is, they still have their ideals, they want to make a difference. And they have been in my office weeping when they've seen Journey of the Universe, this film, saying, I know now I belong. I have a purpose, and the horizon of meaning and hope opens up to them. And that's what Teilhard was saying, dynamizing human action for the change that needs to happen. So we're very much on the same wavelength. I love your contagion of hope in your talk. Marvelous.
You did say, Your Eminence, that we are all in this together. You emphasized from Fratelli Tutti, which I think would be one of the signs of hope after Laudato Si, that we have this follow-up encyclical that references, that's also in the spirit of Assisi, that references Laudato Si a dozen times and builds upon it and expands to the other issues that are facing us, but shows that climate change and climate justice are very much connected with all of these issues that we are facing today, and may be, in fact, the bottom issue, which then Pope Francis says is a spiritual problem. But he emphasizes we. He emphasizes this we, all of us together in rich diversity. So I think that's one of the signs of hope, built upon this agreement on human fraternity between the Holy Father and the Grand Imam of Grand Mufti of Al-Azhar. Do you want to make any comment on that relationship, Your Eminence?
Well, we cannot neglect, while protecting ecology and working at the service of promoting climate justice in order to preserve our planet, without thinking of human beings. The Creator created us, and we have to take care of our common home. And therefore, this attention given by Pope Francis, that it is not only a question of green or blue ecology, but that at the heart of our globe, there is the human person. We have to preserve both. So we cannot conceive the issue as thinking about the others. The others are not responsible of what is happening, but we have to transform it from others into we. We are protagonists. We are those who are responsible of what we are suffering of. And we have the responsibility and the task for transforming, for implementing, and for the promoting the creativity of preserving our planet. And here I think, as I mentioned, that religion and science go together, because we are in need, if we want also to preserve our planet, the help and the support of science.
Yes, and it's good to reiterate that there's, as far as the Catholic Church is concerned, there's not a conflict between science and religion, that we fought that battle a century ago. Again, if you have questions to our viewers, if you have questions, Berkeley Center at georgetown.edu, email them and identify yourself. We have a question from Barbara Bourne, who is a Catholic and a writer from the Los Angeles area. You think about the fires that California has been suffering during this long period. This may be a question more for Mary Evelyn and John and myself than your eminence. America is one of the most grievous agents of economic and social, is one of the of economic and social environmental degradation, and exemplifies the concerns raised in Laudato Si. Yet American church leadership, now it expands beyond the Catholic Church, is almost silent on the issue while forwarding religious liberty and preeminence of abortion. What can we do to change this?
I'm struck by the possibilities that the Cardinal has mentioned in interreligious dialogue, considering the Islamic tradition and the trust doctrine, al-amana, the sense that in the Islamic tradition, there's a reflection on verses in the Quran when the divine laid forward a doctrine of trust, or a sense of responsibility for creation, and creation passed it by for the most part, but the human spoke up, and the human took responsibility. It accepted the trust doctrine. So here we have in the Islamic tradition a way of thinking about human responsibility, accepting responsibility for creation. And I think this is an interesting dynamic that comes out of interreligious dialogue. We begin to think about how we will address the problems raised in the question, and that all of the traditions have ways of coming at these issues from their own religious teachings, as His Eminence indicated in his comments.
Yeah, and I'm hoping that we'll get to John's talk in a few moments, John Grimm's talk.
No, the questions are more important now.
Well, John, why don't you, we do have one question to follow up on that. And then John, let's hear from you, okay? Your comments.
I think we should answer that question, though. The question was directed at religious leadership in the US. And that is, I think we have to be very frank. The bishops have not embraced Laudato Si as we would like it to be, but the next generation is. And there's a Catholic climate movement in this country led by Dan Mishlove, and a global Catholic climate movement led by Thomas Insuas. So this is why the next generation is so crucial. And we can't always look to leadership. We need to look to the laity. We need to look to women. And we need to look to other religions to be in solidarity with us.
Let's give Dan Mishlove's official website. What is it, Mary Evelyn? Catholic Climate?
The Catholic Climate Covenant, Catholic Climate Covenant. And then there's the Global Catholic Climate Movement. We can give you these URLs later, I think would be good.
Yes, good. And let me just say this, that our new cardinal in Washington, D.C., Archbishop and Cardinal Designate Wilton Gregory, while he was in Atlanta as Archbishop, developed 3 years ago, an action plan for the Archdiocese for implementing Laudato Si. Now, that's the kind of leadership I think that we need to get working on the grassroots level, on the local church level, and into the parishes. And maybe perhaps after this election, I think we have an election coming up in a couple of days, we can then get on to the real issues at hand. We do have an issue, a question though from Paul Martin at Columbia University, who said, the goals seem clear, but how do we begin to hear these messages in our churches and mosques?
Paul Martin, I remember you from years ago. Nice to see you, and best to your wife, Robin. I think that's the crucial question, but picking up on John Borelli's point, Michael Therrien has worked with the Chicago Archdiocese on getting the teaching materials available on Laudato Si. There's an excellent teaching book in Atlanta on this work. Interfaith Power and Light has picked up on this to move it into the churches and synagogues and mosques. But I agree with you. It's not yet on the ground in the full way it should be. But I'm very encouraged in this Vatican dicastery conversation on the post-COVID world and the ecology that people in many, many parts of the world are picking up even more than the US on Laudato Si. So that's why we need to bring this forward, and we need to join with the environmentalists who I mentioned, who are eminent people, and see Laudato Si as critical. The whole University of California system has an online class on the climate crisis, and there's a section that I and others did on religion where Laudato Si is featured, and that's open to all the California system. So there's ways in which this is getting out. It's going to take a long time, and we need the next generation on
Yes,
board.
and along with religious leadership from hierarchy especially, and also from laity, we now begin to see in educational settings where we're preparing students who are becoming literate. They're aware of the teachings in their religious traditions, and they're able to bring them forward into environmental issues. So this is also encouraging.
May I say a word
Yeah.
in this context is that I think that in the USA and beyond, in other parts of the world, as we have already mentioned, there have been and there are thousands and thousands of initiatives at the grassroots,
Yes.
many local churches, many mosques, also interreligious, ecumenical and interreligious collaboration between Christians and Muslims and between believers of other religious traditions with people of goodwill who have no faith, who do not believe, but who are always ready to collaborate because they have, thanks to the present day reality and thanks to all the work that has been done in these 5 years of Laudato Si, of which we are today commemorating its anniversary, has produced a lot of the positive, and so I would examples, and I would say yes, there could be pros and cons, but in many senses. But the reality is that we should be positive. We must recognize all what has been done, the openness among and the relationship among world religious leaders, and at the same time, well, this encouragement we need in order to continue implementing these values that in these past 5 years we have achieved. And we have to be very thankful to Pope Francis for inspiring humanity to walk along this path.
In this partnership with Al-Azhar University, have you seen mosques from a global perspective, mosques around the world, Islamic organizations getting involved in response to or picking up Laudato Si's encouragements?
Yeah. It has been distributed in many parts of the world, and for example, through the Higher Committee for Human Fraternity, we have introduced, for example, at the level of Al-Azhar University, who reaches hundreds of organizations, centers, schools, university, and they have introduced this curriculum with a special program educating to ecology, to human fraternity, and probably now with the new encyclical, of which the representative of the Grand Imam was with us in presented to the world. The new encyclical was there. So education is a key element, and there is this goodwill of thinking in educating new generation by introducing in the curricula aspect concerning ecology, human fraternity, and global human love we need.
That's right. Good, thank you. And then there's a major section in the encyclical on education as the hope of the future. Let's hear from Professor Grimm, your reflections.
John, I think actually you probably have a set of questions, and the questions would, I think, be helpful at this time to hear what people are thinking. And I'll incorporate my remarks into the response to questions, because I think it would be good to hear from the listening audience also.
Well, oh, all right. We have a question from my colleague here at Georgetown, Professor Father Peter Phan. How do you see the impact of Laudato Si on interreligious dialogue and collaboration in Asia?
Well,
I do know that when the Holy Father went to Thailand, he was emphatic on this, as well as in Japan. That was at the end of 2019. Go ahead, Mary Evelyn.
Well, interreligious dialogue and the environment in Japan, Peter Phan, you're an expert on this, of course. But I do think where I could speak is from where the Asian religions are moving forward. And that's where we were trying to evoke from their texts and traditions to retrieve their ideas on the environment and justice, and to reinterpret them for modern times, and to reincorporate them. So that's what, as you know, these books on Hinduism and ecology, and Confucianism and ecology, Taoism and ecology, etc., are all about. And I do think, again, on our website, you can see engaged projects all across Asia of Buddhist monks who are ordaining trees, of Hindu priests and laity who are planting trees around temples, of the Tibetan Buddhist community in the Himalayas who, with the Karmapa, the 17th Karmapa, are working on climate change in 55 monasteries. Clearly, the Dalai Lama has been an astonishing leader on this for many, many years. I'll just maybe conclude with Confucianism in China. With Due Ming, one of the leading scholars of Confucianism, there have been conferences over this past decade on Confucianism for an ecological civilization in China. Due Ming is very, very supportive of Laudato Si. He's based at Beijing University, a very significant place for these kinds of dialogues and discussions. So more is happening than is being reported, but I think you can look on the Forum website for statements and engaged projects that are happening. And there's a special section on Laudato Si on the Forum website, as well as on climate change.
Your Eminence, we seem to...
Can you hear me? Because
we can hear you. We can hear you.
Okay. Well, you know, I would like, as a response to Father Peter, that I think that, I don't know, but I'm convinced that perhaps the reception of Laudato Si and this ecological issue has had, since its very beginning, a deeper impact in Asia than elsewhere. And I have mentioned these documents already published, declarations in 2015. The time to act is now. A Buddhist declaration on climate change, or by Buddhist climate change statement to all leaders, and Hindu declaration on climate change. I have been accompanied the Holy Father in his apostolic visit to Thailand and to Japan, and there have been several moments in which it has come in the discourses and in sharing together with authorities a clear interest of Asian society and Asian communities, much concerned and aware about the necessity of acting now in order to promote the values of the Laudato Si. So it is a good collaboration given coming from the Far East.
Yes. And I think just to pick up on that is that we started the conferences at Harvard because we were so concerned about India and China with over 1 billion people and their modernization processes and how they would change the face of the planet. And that's what's happening. And that's why the concerns for the health there and their own environment and their people is so very critical, and why Laudato Si so important.
We have a question from Carolyn Welberry, who's in family medicine. Crisis, wait a minute. Crisis brings people together. How do the speakers reconcile this with the deep divisions around our coronavirus crisis? Greater divisions are likely as resources become increasingly scarce and mass migration spread inevitable unrest and tribalism.
Well, the search for universal understanding that crosses cultural differences implied in the question, and the difficulties of our time, the vulnerabilities also open that sense of the Chinese character of crisis, which sees paths that we have to choose, and how religious teachings bring us into an understanding of the pathways ahead of us. I believe the Cardinal referred in one of his remarks to pilgrimage and the sense of this very old activity in the human community, where people often undertook pilgrimage out of a deep vulnerability. We think of pilgrimage in the Canterbury Tales perhaps as a very joyful and a gossip-filled time of travel where people come to the holy place. But I think there was also a deep sense of loss and pain and vulnerability during those pilgrimages. So I think we also have our own pilgrimage at this time, the call towards a journey, and this understanding of journey in the religious traditions of the past was often across landscapes to a holy place. And while we do not lose that, we also add the time dimension. We begin to see that our journey with landscapes has passed through time. We begin to be aware of this emergent universe that we've come out of, and the vulnerabilities that we now have, and that open up moments of crisis reflection for us, that they bring us to extraordinary insights as we travel together. And I think one insight that I felt surface in response to Peter's last question, the sense in India and the traditions of India, as we've undertake some of our exchanges with yourself, John, about the sense of bhakti or devotion or love in the traditions of India. And that feeling of deep affection that I have felt when we have listened to Swamis like Radhananth in Mumbai and Srivatsa Goswami in Vrindavan, these great teachers in Hinduism who have a sense of the loving affection now extended to the earth community. These are new understandings and tradition that come out of our vulnerability, as this question suggests. Maybe there's a further comment from Mary Evelyn and the Cardinal.
Well, just briefly, fundamentalism arises in times like this. This is clear from history. So we've got fundamentalisms in religions all over the world: Christianity, Judaism, Islam, Hinduism. Look at the leader of India right now, and so on. So fundamentalisms, the pulling back into assured truths and ways of being, is what we're facing. And fundamentalisms in terms of politics and economics as well. This is why Barry said we need a new story. We don't need a story of an American dream of materialism gone mad, of a market economy that has no restraints. That's what Laudato Si is speaking about. And that is the two worlds, this breaking apart of an old world and a new world that will have equity and justice and ecology in its forefront. And that's why the Earth Charter was so important as a declaration of interdependence. So yes, it's a gruesome, fearsome time. What we're seeing is not easy to bear. But Teilhard bore during the First World War trench warfare. And out of that came his deep hope for dynamizing human actions. That's where we are. We're in a trench of incredible divisions. I agree. And it's painful.
We seem to have some connection problems with the Vatican office there. Your Eminence, can you hear us?
Yes, I can. Yeah.
Do you have a response to that question about?
Well, I would like to be positive. Really, this is part of our human nature, and I think that our growth, human growth, and our human maturity comes through the superation and overcoming crises that we have to face during our earthly life, and we find that we are different from each other, and sometimes that there might be divisions among people. So there is a crisis, there are divisions, but could we look at them in a positive way so that in diversity we may grow through our human crisis we have to afford day after day in order to accept and to recognize that this is our human reality. So I would be positive in this sense that we cannot avoid these differences, but differences are, this is my experience with regard to interreligious dialogue, that people see that the diversity or the divisions within Christianity or within Islam as a problem. And I see them as the riches of a diversity. And there might be crises between one and the other, but we have this common joint responsibility of recognizing all of us that we are citizens, we are human beings, and that we are also believers. And as such, even if I see that there are divisions and that we have to face crises, we have all capacities given to us by our Creator to be able to overcome them in order to better our life and to think of a better future for a new generation.
Good. Thank you, Your Eminence. Well, this question that we have from a retiree, Hermi Villasenor, it speaks right to this as a follow-up. Laudato Si challenges us to change not only the way we relate to the environment, but more importantly, to change ourselves so that from that interior change to change the world. There are many initiatives happening now, but how do you see and make sure that this is connected with the important aspect of interior change? How do you make sure that we are not just technicians and scientists, but people of faith expressing faith conviction? In this way, we change the world.
Yeah, it's a powerful question, bringing us to reflect upon interiority in relationship to the implementation of technological change in our world. And I sense that our reflections upon religious teachings in this regard, we tend to box religious teachings or to place them in an interior world, but the character of these religious teachings, I think, throw light on that interiority, and they throw different kinds of light in ways in which religious teachings are constantly orienting. They're orienting us out into the world. So interiority is not disassociated or detached from the world, but religious teachings do arise in this interior realm, but they orient us out also. And in orienting out, I think the world then responds by nurturing. And religions have realized this. Just think about the importance of food in all of the religions. It's a natural turn of the religions to be concerned with the way we eat, what we're eating, how food is grown. So these environmental issues, they come back to us in the nurturing dynamic of the earth as it returns food to us. And we then begin to think about this inner dynamic that we have of being grounded. We're constantly grounding ourselves in the religions as we reach out to the earth, and the earth in turn is grounding us. I recall being at a ceremonial, a winter dance ceremonial among Okanagan peoples of the Northwest, and an elderly woman was speaking to her people who had suffered just incredible difficulties that year on the Colville Reservation. And as she spoke, she said, "It has been so trying for us this year. We don't know where to step. We don't know which way to go next, but we do know that wherever we step on Mother Earth, and she never lets us down." That elder was speaking of that grounding that the religious traditions all are aware of, orienting us, nurturing us, grounding us. And then finally, as the question raises, transforming. That transforming is not simply an isolated or separate act, just as in our environmental dialogues among the religions. It's not just a separate act, it's woven into all that we do in our life. And so the religions themselves in their transformation are connected with this deeper interior, orienting, grounding, and nurturing.
May I also recall once more that we are always constantly called to change. And religiously, we are always called to convert ourselves to God, to our brothers and sisters, because we are not alone. We cannot save ourselves by our own. We have to not to change by our own the world, the ecology, or whatever we may say, but we have to transform by changing ourselves. So I am very thankful to Professor Green, because transformation is a key word. And this is what we need today. We don't have to destroy everything to start anew. We have to transform our hearts. We have to change our attitudes. We have to recognize that we alone cannot walk and live on our planet, that we have to make this journey together. And this is the pilgrimage. I remember Pope Francis telling us on the occasion of the 50th anniversary of our dicastery, telling us and reminding us that please be companions of every human being on our journey towards the truth. So we are walking, and we have to change ourselves because we cannot find a narrow way to reach the objective, but we have to go all together, shoulder to shoulder, in order to say, let us look ahead, let us look in front of us. What are our problems? What are our difficulties? What can we change ourselves together in order to better our society, to better our lives, and to become more fraternal among us?
I recall when Pope Paul VI in 1964 formed the Pontifical Council. It was a secretariat in those days. He said, and the same message was right there. No pilgrim to this city, no matter how distant that pilgrim is geographically, no matter how far that pilgrim is removed from Catholicism, will ever again be a stranger in this city. They will have a place that will receive them and talk to them and enter into dialogue. And so to hear Pope Francis reiterate that on the 5th anniversary, and this was his message, wasn't it? That we will not change. We will not change this environmental catastrophe unless we are converted, unless we go through a conversion. And that's why, perhaps that is why he says it's a spiritual problem. Is that right?
Yes, and the ecological conversion is his word over and over again, that he says will seep through the door like a spirit. It's a wonderful metaphor. And I just wanted to say quickly that question is so important about the spiritual roots of this change, because, you know, if we take traditional Catholic spirituality out of Thomas à Kempis and a 15th century imitation of Christ spirituality that was very much anti-world and otherworldly oriented, that's part of the change that we need to activate and transform, to use the Cardinal's wonderful word and John's. We've got to transform our spiritual exercises so that we have roots that will sustain us through despair, through disempowerment. And I just want to put in a little levity here for women's spirituality, for eco-spirituality that's coming out of all kinds of women's concerns and issues. And that will be part of the rooting. I think women have so much to offer for this transformative moment, as I know you do too.
Thank you very much. This interior conversion is so important. 55 years ago, when at Vatican II, the Catholic Church committed itself first to ecumenical dialogue with other Christians, it said, there'll be no ecumenism worthy of the name without this interior conversion, unless you have this change of attitude. And of course, that's what interreligious dialogue is about, and that's what ecological conversion is about. So let's mount our spiritual resources. Well, going to the other end of resources, we have a question from a friend, I'm sure, Joseph Prabhu, who is a emeritus now, professor of philosophy at California State University in Los Angeles. Joseph asks, given the central importance of economics and economic life, both to human well-being and to planetary survival, there seems to be a strange and unfortunate lacuna in the program in not giving them greater prominence. Pope Francis has been a fierce critic of neoliberal economics and the values and goals which underpin it. The Laudato Si took pains to include some economists in this composition, but the critique needs to be elaborated, especially here in the United States, where neoliberal economics underpins much of the economic platforms of both of the political parties. So our theme is interreligious responses, but very definitely Pope Francis addresses economic issues and the problems of trickle down and neoliberalism. Response?
Yes, Joseph, you're very kind to remind us of the lacuna. It's the case in any presentation that there are gaps and places to explore and to expand. And we rely on leaders from the audience to come forward and to raise these questions. Also, I'm reminded by your question of the basic exchange dynamic, the exchange between humans with the earth, with one another. And this exchange has often been read as anthropocentric, that we humans are the one who are receiving from the world. But in my undertaking of visits and good conversation with indigenous elders, I find them speaking so often of the giving character of the earth, the sense that we live in the midst of this giving, and we humans take responsibility for returning our gift back to the earth, for leaving. And there's a marvelous statement of this understanding in Robin Kimmerer's book, Braiding Sweetgrass, where she reflects on the nature of learning and of teaching students and of a mother with her children. In all of this, seeing how the world is giving in such a variety of ways. So I very much welcome your question, Joseph, about the economic realities that we're groping towards and the consumerist objectifying values of an economy that we hope to diminish.
Yeah, oh, sorry.
No, I want the Cardinal to respond. Yeah, and then I'll
Thank you.
Yeah. Please, go ahead.
Go ahead, Your Eminence.
Okay, so, well, just simply, I would like to recall in this context that I'm very thankful to Professor Joseph. I'm not much devoted to issues concerning economic problems and these kinds of realities. But what I may share with you in this session is just to recall that Pope Francis, with Laudato Si, what he wanted was to revive in the church and in the world the social doctrine of the church. So if you take any compendium of the social doctrine of the church, you may find all what is the pontificate of Pope Francis so far. He is much dedicated to many issues that concern the human being placed in the center of creation, where obviously there are many what he calls inequalities. And these inequalities, as we can see in the world, is bringing lot of distress and lot of injustices here and there. So any effort that might be done in order to restore the human dignity of every human person, not only spiritual, but mainly humanly, that everyone may live in dignity and enjoying from that economical point of view this dignity they deserve, and that in many parts of the world is missing.
And this was the theme of Fratelli Tutti too, I think, to show
Yeah.
how all of these issues facing us today.
And it is, yeah, and it is social doctrine of the church. I recommend to have a look to any text that refers to social doctrine of the church, because sometimes I have heard people in the media or publishing making criticism by saying, "Oh, the Pope is going too fast," or "the Pope is too traditionalist," or "is too left-wing oriented," or the Pope is just simply promoting this social doctrine of the church that claims for the human dignity of every human person, and therefore working together for preserving our planet, for promoting social cohesion, and for building together our society so that we may live in justice, in peace, and in dignity. Thank you, Professor Joseph.
Thank you. And I love this point because we could go all the way back to Pope Leo and Rerum Novarum, couldn't we, about social justice? Joseph, I did mention market capitalism, without restraints and so on. So it was lightly mentioned, and you're so right to bring it up again. I do want to say, I've been in meetings in New York with business leaders. This is incredible to me, who are looking at Laudato Si as a way of creating a new GDP. Think of it. That is extraordinary. Joseph Sachs at Columbia, a leading economist, is a big promoter of Laudato Si as well, and very much anti this disruptive, devouring market economy without restraints. So I do think in ecological economics with Richard Norgaard and many others have been working on this basis for a new and robust ecological economics that has a base in the economy, but in business and finance and so on. And the divestment movement is over the top, $14 trillion now of businesses that are divesting around the world. The Vatican has been active in this as well, of course, and leading the way. But this has been led by religious communities, the divestment movement.
And I think it's very important to reflect upon the values that the different religions bring to questions of economic realities. For example, and now during the election here in the United States, there's so much talk of alternative energies and the economic possibilities of these new alternative energies. And while this is a very important incremental step in recognizing the dignity of labor,
yes,
as the Cardinal has mentioned, embedded in these economic issues, but we can also see that there is a further step towards the sense of the beauty, the wonder, the joy that we have in our experience of the world around us. And that this is another step towards the interior understandings, the contemplative interior journey that also accompanies any kind of economic development. So jobs are important, but also the way we understand our jobs in relationship to the larger Earth community.
Yeah, that's right. Good. I think your reference, Mary Evelyn, was to Jeffrey Sachs. Is that right?
Yes. Mhm.
That's right. Good. And the most recent social doctrine of the church document is Fratelli Tutti. And there we have it. And that one we'd like to hear more about too. We'd like to hear our religious leaders in the Catholic Church talking about that too. We don't hear that much.
Good.
And it's a rather extraordinary document. We have one question. We've had several questions like this, and I think this is time for one more. It comes to us from Linda Conroy, who's at Still Point at Beckside Spirituality Center. And essentially her question is, I don't hear about this in my diocese. I don't hear about this in my parish. I don't think our parish priest has read Laudato Si. Do we have any strategies to suggest to people? We're talking about parishes, congregations for Jewish synagogues, congregations, Muslim congregations, all of these. What are our strategies?
His Eminence.
Well, I always say that we have to start from the grassroots. So I think that what the church and what the Pope is offering to the church is to be shared with the entire world, because we are all brothers and sisters. So, for example, as you have mentioned, Professor John Borelli, Laudato Si, Fratelli Tutti is not for Catholics, it's for all human beings. And Laudato Si is not for some sectors of people who are involved or committed in promoting ecology, but it is for the whole human family. So, but I think that we cannot wait that something comes from above. Yes, we do wait, and when we receive any document like an encyclical or any other document, we appreciate it. But the real movement comes from its roots, and there is always a possibility as the grassroots in a parish, someone working and promoting it with their brothers and sisters, Muslims or Buddhists or Hindus, and having an experience of it, and then going to international forums or to local forum of discussions and sharing together in order to offer their experience. And this experience will be not something theoretical, like saying you have to do that, we have to do this, but rather this is what we have done. This is what we are doing, and let it be an example for you to do the same. And I think that there are a lot of initiatives and strategies that are done at the grassroots. Yes, thank you for the question, because we also need from above the support, the encouragement, and the help in order that these experiences may become more spread here and there, in order to, in this sense, I have mentioned many times that anything negative that happens in the world, globally, everybody will know about it. Anything good that happens in the world, nobody will know about it. So sometimes I have been invited to international forums to make big lectures with big personalities. And I always, sometimes I told them, listen, what about inviting to an international forum simple people who at the grassroots are living these values? Let them go to the platform. Let them address you who are experts. And after listening to them, call to do, what can we do? What can be done? And I think that in this context, we could better our progressive help in order to spread the good news of the contents of Laudato Si.
That's terrific advice. We're at the end. Mary Evelyn, John, did you have any quick comment on that, or shall we just?
Well, I was recently with a friend who was reflecting on how she would give instructions to the children at her church now on this online medium during the pandemic. And she had come up with a sock puppet. She had made a puppet, and this puppet then was able to speak. And all of a sudden I was looking at His Eminence talk again, and the wonderful comment on this brothers and sisters on a wonderful pilgrimage woven together. And I saw this sock puppet teaching children how we are woven together on this pilgrimage. And that gives me hope to think of joy children with a puppet.
Thank you very much. Thank you very much. Your Eminence, thank you so much for joining us today, 5 hours away from us in Rome, for a keynote and for your comments, especially reflecting with us through the question and answers. We appreciate, as Dr. DeGioia thanked you for asking us to do this conference 18 months ago when we met with you in Rome, in the days when we had meetings without masks and everything. And thank you for that. And Professors Tucker and Grimm, thank you so much for your really, really fine response and comments and exchange, and for all that you're doing, the work that you're continuing. Now, our viewers can hear Professor Tucker again. She's moderating our panel this afternoon. So you return to this webinar conference in the same way that you entered it this morning. And this webinar conference will be at 1 p.m. Eastern Daylight Time. So if you're in Rome, you're 5 hours ahead of us now. And it will go till 2:45. This afternoon conference will be on how Laudato Si resonates among religious traditions. And we have 3 panelists, Mohammed Farouk of Fordham University, Vasudha Narayanan from University of Florida, and Kyoichi Sugino in New York with Religions for Peace and a member of Rissho Kosakai. And then tomorrow at the same time in the morning, or at 10 a.m. Eastern Daylight Time, we have our 3rd and final conference, and that will be a session on implementation of Laudato Si, a call for multi-religious collaboration. And we have a number of panelists then. So we thank you, viewers, for joining us today. We appreciate the questions that you were able to send, and you'll be able to do that for these 2 remaining sessions. And once again, thank you to our speakers, and God bless everyone.